except grief.
Well, this, in many ways, you don't mind if I stand up so I can see everything. Then when I get tired, I'll sit down and we'll be done. As I look at this, since this city was started, and my wife was very active in this in the very beginning, back in the mid-aughts.
This is Gordon Walker. We're recording, sorry, go ahead, Gordon.
And the vision at that point in time is totally different than it is today. And during that intervening time, we have lived away from Cottonwood Heights for a period of time, and we come back and I see the budget has doubled. When the original intent was that the budget wouldn't double, I listened to the meetings. How many of you have gone to the evening meetings? There was just one. Oh, quite a few of you. Thank you. So you don't have anything to hear from me because I have no new thoughts. Actually, that's not true. And, you know, going to Carmel, Indiana, I'm sure that's a wonderful place. I spent my early career with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I was in charge of all of the offices nationwide, and so I did a lot of traveling and visited all the latest and greatest places. And there was a developer who developed a property. Many of you have seen it. In fact, they featured it quite frequently in Baltimore on the harbor. Jim Roush developed the city Columbia and also these metropolitan areas, which are wonderful. And now they're becoming passé. It's interesting. Just like all types of development are in cycles. There's a house being built by where my daughter lives, and we're talking about the exterior on it. Well, even the exteriors on these places on Fort Union. So let's talk about this, and we can talk about, tell me what you want to talk about.
Where the development.
Hillside.
Not so much the road.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Hillside, 10 acres. The corner is carved out. It's on a long-term lease to Walgreens. If you listen to the comments,
Do we own the lease?
excuse me?
Do we own?
No, no. In fact, if you look at this map that someone, well, I brought my own map today in case you wanted an experiment. Inside the green is what the city owns. This is the upper area, and this is all the way east. And this is the exclusionary area here for Walgreens. I don't know what their rights of way are because it doesn't show that they have a legal right of way, but I'm sure that they do. So that's something. It depends who you listen to as to whether they want to change things or not change things. No one one of the first comments that I saw is, well, we don't want our view shed changed. And I think no one has a 360 view shed, because if they do, they're moving out and going someplace else where they can get a different one. And see, even now what we do is we take our view away with a simple push of a button. And we have this view shed was to make sure no one would go to sleep. I have a commitment from, I forget who it is, if when he goes to sleep, we're all leaving. Okay, we've had 2 nights, very successful. And if all of you came, everybody who wanted to hear had the opportunity to speak. Some repetition. I drew some things out of that, and I made the comment to someone, and they said, their opinion of it was totally different than mine. hearing is that no one really wants any change. They want their view to remain. They want a grocery store. The grocery store was there. It was adequate. I shop there all the time. My wife shops elsewhere, but when I shop, I like to shop there. And what happened is you had a private sector developer that raised the price on the land, trying to make it more economically productive. And they said, no, we're out of here. So now, citizens want that back. A grocery store. A grocery store. Everybody likes the Harmon's in Holiday. That keeps coming up as a choice. So you have to look at that. There was one person in the first night, and I'm sorry, I don't have the name. I can dig through my notes and come pretty close to it. I can either target in between. But the thought was to trade out Dan's from its corner, because access is a little bit tricky these days, much more tricky than it used to just because of increased traffic, and bring it up here, and then you could put something big and heavy down in that area. So the mayor has given us the opportunity to envision without any economic ramifications. Do you know how scary that is as a taxpayer? That's really scary. And quite frankly, I went to the city manager and I said, city council needs to start putting constraints on this so that we know what it is. Because we're on the hook right now for $14 million. That's a pretty big mortgage. And with the power to tax, we can make the payments, but we can make the payments. So that to me, as a private sector kind of a guy, that is on my mind continually about the $14 million. My background is in affordable housing, heavily in affordable housing, and I spent 11 and a half years at the state of Utah in charge of housing and community development, much of which was dealing with homeless issues. And then I was hired by San Diego to come down and deal with their homeless issue. They're number 4 in the country. We're way lower than 4. But Los Angeles is number 1, New York is number 2, Seattle is number 3, and San Diego is number 4 as far as the number of homeless. We probably will not have to deal with that issue significantly. But we do have to deal with affordable housing. There was a president of the Senate who was very successful. He was a very successful real estate person that didn't believe in much about affordable housing until one day he had a really nice house down south in Sandy. His children couldn't really live in his city. And that's happening here in Cottonwood Heights. So, there are more people who've spoken at these that do not want big block housing. Or they don't want affordable housing. There's a grant of $1 million from GOEO, which is the government's Office of Economic Opportunity. It used to be GOED, but every new governor changes the initials, so now it's GOEO. They gave $1 million with no firm commitment to the number of houses. In other words, according to the person that gave it, that was the unwritten part. Probably the written part of the obligation has more firm language, but you could do one. It is virtually impossible to build one housing unit economically. It doesn't work. That's why most of these buildings have at least 100 units in them. so that you have at least an economic value. So housing is one opportunity. They want a grocery store. I personally would like some local restaurants, locally owned restaurants. I've been to all the others before. Now we're looking for some, the return of Carl's. We heard a lot about the return of Carl's. So where we are right now is that we've been as a group, we've been taking opinions. We've been listening to you folks. And if there's other things you want to say, feel free to do it, because it's being recorded and it will be transcribed and made available to all of the members of this committee in making the decision. Now, we were gifted, the members of the committee, with these two maps so that we know what the scale is and how the fact is that the land goes downward here. Any of you who've been in the military can read contour lines. And if you haven't been in the military and can't read contour lines, go down and walk it and determine, am I going uphill or downhill? Because that's exactly what all those lines...
What about all us backpackers? We know topo maps, right?
Dropping the grade, bringing it down with big retaining walls in
Those-
order to not block the use.
Those are actually all options. And everything is an option. We can re-sculpture, we can redo everything. The city can. To put anything in there that you want. I mean, one of my first thoughts is, he said, well, what do you like? I like rooftop dining. Well, rooftop dining is a bummer for the people that live beneath you. Or a stinker, one or the other. But so that, yes, that's possible. And actually what I have done, I've gone through, we were given, I'm showing you the toys that we have as members of the committee. We have little squares for parking. We have big areas for community gathering space. This is the size of Mill Creek Common. How many of you want a 6-story building on that property? You do?
Maybe. Yeah, I'm open to the possibility. It's a commercial zone.
And then I have a townhome here. Townhomes are highly inefficient forms of housing. Okay? And here's a restaurant. This is a small restaurant. This is probably the re-edition of Carl's. I don't know, did it say? I don't think it did. It just said the number of square feet. Oh, this is the size of Lone Star's property. The taqueria across the street, kitty corner. Well, various sizes of restaurants. This is the size of Cheesecake Factory. How many of you want a Cheesecake Factory in there?
Whoa.
Does anyone want
Not
one?
one single hand went up for a Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, they're still asleep.
I
Come
can
on.
drive the 5 miles.
What?
That's right.
I can drive the 5 miles.
Over to Fashion Place, yeah.
More townhomes. So you have to get a mid-sized community gathering space. See, one thing I like about Mill Creeks, and we have been tasked to go to several of these within our state, because everybody's trying to do what we're doing. Every city is. And the Mill Creek went a little out of their way to go high. It really doesn't matter, but this last night, the last evening, there was a thought, I think we need something that would gather us together, cause us to come together. I was down in Kanab working on another project that I'm working on. And I walked out of the motel right at 7 o'clock, and the church bells were ringing. I am a sucker for church bells.
Me too. I love church bells.
And you get that when you live in the eastern part of the country or in Europe, where I've spent quite a bit of time just listening to bells. And I thought, you know, that could be a simple 6-story bell tower if we wanted 6 stories. But it would be a place that I know that I personally would go to. It is not in my mind to go to that mall area to hang out. I don't hang out at Walgreens. So, but we need something to identify us by. Not just mountains, but something else. One of the things that I like very much is housing. Well, here's the grocery store. This one is Holiday Harmons. See, we have highly sophisticated tools to help us do it. So what we have is I have this, well, I guess this one is the one I use. I will put these different squares on that I believe on, and then we will discuss them. For example, go ahead.
I don't know if this came up in the other meeting, but something that could help a lot, like check a lot of boxes is like a food hall for like so small local, like for startup restaurant owners, like shared resources, shared space, community space. That there's just like one set of bath restrooms that everyone can use, like something that.
There's one on 27th East that they put in. Are you familiar with that one? 27th East in between 33rd or 39th and 45th on the west side of the street. Just,
Yeah, there's been a.
it's that same, it's what you're talking about.
Yeah, like a food hall, but it's also event space, but it's also good for like a small F&B business to get started.
Well, and it's interesting that you're bringing this up. In fact, for the sake of our recording, all these little green microphones at the table, because what you said was so articulate. So if you have a statement, if it's just a question, you can shout it out. But when you want to make a statement, if you don't mind stepping toward the table, we'll make sure it gets on the recording. For the sake of those who want to hear this afterwards, I'm just going to paraphrase what you said. And it's interesting about the idea of these kiosks or shared space so that small local businesses, local, not only restaurants, but perhaps retail or services can survive economically versus having the kind of space that is conventional within Utah or within Cottonwood Heights with our strip malls. And so on the ground level of the Mill Creek, the new Mill Creek City Hall, they have kiosks there that are on that same model, that it's a shared restroom, etc. And I happened to bump into Mayor Silvestrini, of course, the mayor of Mill Creek, the other day, and asked him if he was pleased with his new city hall. And it was interesting because his response was, I would have made it bigger. And I said, can you tell me what part of it you would have made bigger? Because it's 6 or 7 stories high. And he said, well, that ground level of the, and he didn't call them kiosks, there was a different name, a modular something, but I'd be interested to know when Gordon says he wants more local restaurants, because these that model after what we already have, such as Lone Star, is not really what you're talking about. And so I wonder, in the mind of, like, for Gordon Walker, is the local restaurants, could they thrive, at least the smaller ones, in something like she just described? Your thoughts on that?
So, my thought is this. If you want us to deal with your thought, because I don't think you came and spoke at our meetings, did you?
I did not.
Okay, so write
Write it down.
it down,
Sure.
send it in
Yeah.
to the city, and there's a website that you can just upload it. And we receive those copies of those comments that are written. Your question was, can it be done? Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, some of these have the words mixed use on it. In other words, on the main level, if you know the Apollo Apartments in Holiday? Okay, the Apollo apartment, there used to be an Apollo burger there. So this comes complete with grease. And you'll notice on the main floor, on the main level, there are commercial buildings. They're empty right now. The next 2 stories are apartments. Those apartments, they say, I'm just repeating verbiage. I love marketing verbiage. They say are 70% sold. Probably not. None of them is closed. 70% sold, and they sell for $1 million a piece. How many are interested in an apartment for $1 million a piece? Okay. But it is mixed use. So that means that on the main floor, main level, they are able to do it. Yes, you were going to say something. And you don't have to come up if you don't want to.
I do not want to.
Okay.
You know, I've been to the meetings, and it seems like everyone says what they want. What can we have? Is the plan to rip down that whole building and rebuild?
Oh, yes. That'll all be raised to the ground.
We're gonna rip it all down. I was there the other day, and it was a very, very nice building. It still is a very nice building.
So you've heard from the council member that they're going to rip it all down. That thought, I don't have that thought. I don't have that thought.
Well,
Because we don't know what's going there. We're still in the envisioning process, and it doesn't do any good to rip anything down until you know what's going to go in and whether you have the money. So we're really preliminary in many of these things. And I don't mean to disagree with you.
No,
Madam Councilmember.
this is very, very important. I will say that when the council was deliberating over whether to commit the city to a $14 million bonding, you know, the conversations, you know, were that this would be this astounding new place that to my recollection, we talked about it being razed to the ground. So I'm not saying that anything is in writing on that. I mean, to be honest with you, it was very uncomfortable to me that the very few conversations that the CDRA had, which for anybody in the room that doesn't realize the dynamics on this, your elected city council representatives also make up the board of the Community Development and Redevelopment Agency, CDRA. So when you hear that term CDRA, close your eyes, you'll see Ellen Birrell, Sean Newell, you know, so forth, and the mayor. You know, we're the CDRA board. And nothing was ever put in writing over what we envisioned in any way. So they were all conversations, and if the Citizen Advisory Committee makes recommendations that they see a way, because I think that you're all making really excellent points. We can dream about all the things we ever want to have, but we have to come down to practicality. And I want you all to know, one of the reasons why I selected Gordon to represent District 4 is because of his expertise and background in affordable housing. I am a big proponent. I do not want to live in a city where none of the people that work here can live here. I want a city where our teachers, our emergency services, people that work in retail, that they not only can live here, but that people that need to come in from outside of Cottonwood Heights to work a job that doesn't pay $300 an hour, that they can get here via transit. And we don't have a city that's just clogged with automobiles and parking lots. And I appreciate Mr. Chatelain's comment on parking lots, and that's a big piece of this. Do you know, maybe you don't know this, parking space, every parking space, here's what the average cost is. At grade parking, $30,000 a stall. A stall. Underground parking, about twice that. So you got $60,000 to $80,000 for underground parking, and for a stacked parking, you've got about, what is it, Gordon, $40,000 to $60,000 a stall. So we need.
Do underground parking.
Well, I don't.
You know, we don't know. Again, we don't know that because this is a plot of ground that was developed prior to doing a lot of seismic testing. What we're finding, what we're seeing in a lot of the city, it's rampant. It's just ready to crumble beneath us. We probably all ought to sell and move out.
Well, but so why would we rip down a building?
That's a
make
good
a new
question.
building?
And there will be a public hearing on that once we get through a lot of this envisioning. Right now, this truly is this is the plan right now.
One more
Can you see it?
question.
Oh, you have to turn
Look
around.
at there.
What
What do you mean turn around? No, this is a blank
Oh,
sheet
it's
of
blank.
paper.
Oh, got it.
You didn't get it.
Yeah, I didn't. I went right off
What
my head.
timeline are you?
Yeah.
No one's talking about that either.
You know, I'm not totally sure on that, but the city is trying to get something within the next 4 months. When we,
It's 4 months, so we're not going to get to vote out for the council to get what we want.
No, Gordon's,
you will have that opportunity, and I've stated that this is a risk. What the city
14
lead
million already.
is a risk. That is
We're
correct.
going to rip down a building, what's that going to cost?
well,
5 million?
if I may interject, I feel like I need to may I interject?
50 million?
So let me interject that it was never, in our conversations, and again, I believe they're recorded somewhere, so you can go back and listen if you don't want to take my word for it, but the plan was never, in all our conversations, to have all the 10 acres be public space. But I know that that is one of the conversations that the citizen committee is having. Would we dedicate all 10 acres strictly for public gathering and public space? The financial proposition, when I agreed to it back in March a year ago, was that we would have to, for economic reasons, get a developer involved and include some housing. Gordon already threw out the number of 100 units. To me, that's palatable, especially if we had a small, I don't know when I say small, I'm talking about as a percentage, maybe 20% of this, if I may just finish, maybe 20% out of the 10 acres is some kind of, I'd like it to be affordable housing, which would have to go maybe to 5 stories. I don't see that as a problem. I want you to know what this contrasts. One of the things, if anybody in the room hasn't followed this for the last 2 years, it was 2 years ago, we heard a presentation and the developers in our state of Utah wanted 350 units, multifamily units. And their idea of a public gathering place and making it have that element was that there'd be these fortress walls that went up 3 to 5 stories all around. So if you were to be walking along, you'd have a fortress wall, and that would be the way to get the 350 units. And then there was this little public space, if you can imagine having in the shadow of all these tall buildings. I mean, that is their idea of cracking their nut financially. So I really, again, back to what I was trying to finish my thought on, is I wanted Gordon to be a voice for financial practicability and viability for our city. And I support him in a vision of including something that is tall, not all 10 acres, but something that is tall enough to make it multi-use, which he described very accurately as retail and restaurants on the bottom ground level, and then on the upper 3 to 4 stories, some small affordable housing.
Gordon, can
So,
I interject just really fast?
just a minute, we're going to finish this first. You're asking questions that we don't have answers on. We're in the process of getting those answers.
But we have a city council that already has made decisions,
They have not, other than buying the property.
except for Ellen.
Well, Ellen is special.
Ellen is very opinionated, and I do not represent, as they put a disclaimer on every article I ever write, that I do not represent the majority of the city council. So if you leave here today and say, wow, Ellen told us what the city's gonna do, you have to remember, these are my opinions, so
I'm against the city council ever since it was a city council.
The beauty of Ellen is she shows up.
Came up.
Yes.
And I was hoping we'd have 5 Ellens. But we're back to 4 to 1.
Okay,
So,
Audrey,
So what
I know, I
we're
just
gonna
wanna-
get is what those 4 want.
Okay,
So, I
we
love-
elected them.
I love your questions that you're putting out to the city staff. And I talked to a lot of people about this, and I went to the meetings and listened to what they said. And the people I'm talking to feel totally different than the people that are sharing in the meetings. They say we have Target, we have all that area down there with lots of affordable restaurants and shopping. They want something higher, not like look high, not high end, but something more like, you know, I'm not really sure, but they want something nicer where they can hang out. They think that that if you look at our tax dollars, I'm not saying I agree with this or not, they say that what's needed in our city is a step up, not like they're just saying we have so much of the Target and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is they all say it all depends on parking and the pharmacy there. If we can't move the pharmacy, that puts a whole different face on it. Because on the end, that would be such a great place for a park. But if we start with the pharmacy there, what kind of a city center is it? And they all want a lot of housing, really nice housing.
Please do not think about jumping off a cliff on any single idea. There will be many that come up. We've had many come up. Some we can agree with, some we can't agree with. There is disagreement among the 12 people. I mean, there's one person on there that I've known for most of his life that had an idea in his head that he didn't want something. And it was interesting, in the last meeting, he finally said, I can see why we might go a little higher than that. You realize, and this is where, for someone like me, this is very valuable. You'll be second, she is first. Okay? I'll be with you. Is that there are ways that you can mass housing on this and not ruin anybody's view. There's a 25-foot drop there. There's a 15-foot drop to get to these people's level. That's 40 feet. That's higher than the zoning allows right now. Maybe this isn't a big massing house. But one thing, if you don't like Walgreens, you would probably vote to put a big housing complex right down here and down here as a fortress, if you want to have a fortress. But then you ask yourself, what kind of housing do we want? Well, you can have affordable housing. I don't know if you know what affordable housing means or not. There are legal definitions of this. Affordable housing can be very low income at 30% of the area median income. Or it can be moderate, around 50%, or it can legally, and the reason for affordable housing, for example, some of these big projects, you can finance right out of the developer can do that with no money out of their pocket. Okay, that's a big deal for a developer. And our legislature is now giving money away like mad. But you can get affordable housing in and not block anyone's view. You could come on this other end and get some in. So it's on the exterior. You still have the innards to do whatever. The key thing here is, I know that people anticipate everything's going to be raised, and it may be, but there are, for some uses, depending on what we do, it would be convertible. For example, your idea of food stalls could easily fit into one of these buildings. It could be an interior space. We don't know, I don't know, the quality of the construction of those buildings. So I don't know what that would do. It may be cheaper, less expensive, not cheaper. It may be less expensive to tear down and start over. And then you can go down in and put parking underneath if you want. You see, all of this is really a lot like a jigsaw puzzle and putting it together. and we have a blank slate, and that's what the committee is doing. During the month of January, we listened. We listened. And in my notes, I can report back to you what every one of you said. I took reasonable notes that I know what happened, so I can remember it. All right, let's go to more comments.
My question
Then
is,
you're next. I remember.
that's okay. My question is, when is this all gonna happen?
It's happening right now.
So if,
This is a meeting that Ellen has called and asked so that you can ask me questions, and I can at least give you, I could say something simple, well, we had 2 public hearings and that was it. And you'd go home and say, wait a minute, that was a loss of 2 hours. You may still leave here and say it was a loss of 2 hours, but that's
so
okay.
4 months from now, you're saying maybe you'll have something drawn up and,
There will start to be plans, yes.
Okay.
In fact, what we're supposed to, as committee members, we were, at our last meeting, we were supposed to play our game. And I was the only one that took my stuff.
Oh,
There are those that try and tell me I'm disengaged, but I had my stuff all on there. I know right where I want to put.
so in the next
36.
5 years, something's gonna happen. The next 2 years, something's
No.
gonna happen.
Well, most likely it will. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
2 or 5.
It could be expensive. We may have another downturn and not develop. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in a project. I mean, the project at the mouth of the canyon is supposed to have a big apartment complex in it. And all that is there is a sign. And there's also, I mean, we talk to the developer on a regular basis. He's a friend. And we hear what they're going to put on the property, that they're not going to put what they were going to put. Yeah, a developer has to work in the marketplace. All right, you,
Okay.
it's not your wife.
Yeah, I know, she's trying to sneak in on me, nice to have you first. You mentioned Cheesecake Factory earlier, and not one person raised their hand. Just as an observation, I think a place like this needs some sort of an anchor. And if you think about the Cheesecake Factory, go down there and you have to wait an hour to get in. What do?
Go, 2 of you go up 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, right. Generally, what do? You go to the other shops there, right?
Brio you can get into. They have
And you-
just as good food.
You spend time at the other shops that are there and you likely buy something there.
Stole on my comments.
And another observation is you said that these mixed-use projects in Holiday, the commercial spaces are empty.
Well, it's just in the building portion right
Well,
now.
and if you go around the valley, commercial spaces are empty.
That's right.
So I think you need some sort of an anchor. I don't think Cheesecake Factory is a good idea, or a grocer. I think there's plenty of those in proximity, and that's just another big parking lot. But I think a lot of thought needs to go into something that's going to drive people to the site outside of just the surrounding neighborhoods. And if it's going to be mixed use in nature, obviously parking and everything will have to be considered, but there's a plethora of empty commercial spaces. And if you're going to fill it with restaurants and other things, I just think there has to be another driver for that space.
You make very good points. As a committee, we don't control those things. The mayor has asked us to pull everything together, the thoughts of the community. And he's very smart in doing this. Having these 2 meetings, I thought was a great idea. The next processes that we'll be going through is our envisioning and what we anticipate. I mean, we've been given certain tools. That doesn't mean that you have to have that size of a grocery store. You can have half the size of a grocery store. There are people that wanted that. There are actually quite a few people that said, we'd like to see a grocery store. Because because they don't want to take their bike to Smith's or go down the other 3 blocks to Dan's. I mean, the beauty of this project is that we have a blank slate. The mayor has said, you have a blank slate. And that's what we're trying to do, and everybody has good ideas. You probably won't like my ideas. Even my wife doesn't. Or especially my wife doesn't. I don't know. We all have different ideas. You really all wanted to go to Carl's for breakfast this morning. That was the first thing we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And we just found a little restaurant that's just come in that is not quite Carl's, but they have something like it. But it's in Midvale. And that's the problem, is that many of us are going for our outside food opportunities outside the city. And that's why people are saying, let's find something here.
Yeah.
Let's find something here. And we want it to be local.
Twice I've gone to Lone Star Taqueria and told them about this,
Okay?
because that kind of facility would be ideal to be in this, because they can't handle all that they would. But the problem is, they're making a profit. And now what's it going to cost them to move over? But it's people like you that could go to a place that's very popular. If you haven't tried their shrimp tacos, you're crazy. But at any rate, you can go there and say, what would it take for you? Because they don't have enough parking to handle all that they want. But they could come over and have a drive-through, like on one of the corners, maybe on the,
Drive-throughs are not going to be permitted in here.
okay, then maybe that won't.
Well, there are quite a few comments against drive-throughs.
Well, all I'm saying is a popular
I
place like
understand
that
exactly.
is going to draw people because they know it's a winner and they want it there.
So now here's another problem. What are we going to do? What is the city going to do with that space if Lone Star moves up here?
Well, I can tell you that, what was the frozen yogurt?
Nielsen's?
Nielsen's couldn't make it. It's just a little cove that a good business has managed to make a profit.
So we have to be very careful in this, that we don't cannibalize other parts of our city. I mean, that's a tricky issue. So, I mean, the goal would be to attract new people without being disruptive. A few years ago, Planning Commission approved the restaurants. There's 2 restaurants on Fort Union, and one is a nice new Cottonwood Cafe. I don't know what the name of it is, just south of McDonald's. But they don't have the parking, and the access off of Fort Union is really terrible.
It's the Mill Creek Cafe.
It's the Cottonwood Cafe.
It used to be up here at the 7-Eleven.
Well, anyway, it's the one that's down there.
That's actually on Highland.
It's on Highland.
Highland.
Yeah.
Thank you. What did I say?
You said
Fort
Highland.
Union.
I don't know any of the streets. What we have to do is to be careful and draw in good places. Hopefully, we'll expand the inventory, so as residents, we'll keep our tax dollars in the city rather than emboldening Midvale. Midvale used to be our poor cousin. I don't think they are anymore.
So I have to insert myself here. We have 10 more minutes, and then we'll take your question or your comment. But we have now segued into something that I am extremely passionate about, and that is we already have a Fort Union Boulevard master plan. If you've never read it, I highly urge you to read it. It was adopted in 2017, I beg your pardon. It was led by 40 residents, a 40 resident steering committee, and it, I will say, in my opinion, is brilliant. So if you have it ready, either the general plan or the more recent Fort Union Boulevard master plan, it talked about creating a walkable Main Street feeling. And I am always leaning into the microphone, reminding my council colleagues that we already have an adopted Fort Union Boulevard master plan that talks about from roughly on the east side, Hillside Plaza, to approximately Whitmore Library, modifying the way Fort Union Boulevard flows, creating what are called streetscape, a complete street that encourages people to get out of their cars and move about. This ties in with this Carmel, Indiana, what they did there. They took a place of strip malls like we have in that segment of Fort Union Boulevard, which, before you can get to the library or anything, you're walking through an asphalt jungle. So this whole idea of bringing the storefronts and restaurants, even Lone Star, the whole idea is bringing those up toward the curbs and creating a Main Street feeling. Now is our opportunity to make some long-term plans and incentivize, should Lone Star say we don't want the lease anymore, figure out ways to create, again, a more walkable community. I will go on record that I do not support more fast food, places where, cars are idling, and all this, we have to our main sectors of the city. Places want to come, driven there, get out of their car, and patronize our local businesses. I'm going to walk around in this area and not feel like a car moving 40 to 50 miles an hour is going to cream me. I mean, we've had 4 out of the last 5 pedestrians that have been struck by motor vehicles in Cottonwood Heights. They've all been lawfully moving in a crosswalk. What does that say about the roadways of Cottonwood Heights? So we either get a vision for a safer place for the residents who live here, or we continue to add more regional traffic, people that are just driving as fast as they can to get through Cottonwood Heights, to get to, Sandy and Draper, or to get to the mouth of the canyons, or to get to trailheads. We're at a pivotal time. Are we envisioning shuttle systems and ways that people can thoughtfully move around when they want to? We're not taking away anybody's private vehicles, but we're giving alternatives for those who want to move about in a way other than driving everywhere they ever go. So, please.
Okay. I can answer your question.
Would you like to come closer?
I can answer your question on how much it would cost to move Lone Star. And that's because I work for a firm that just priced moving Crown Burger in Mill Creek. It's $5 million. And so it takes it from a viable business to not. And I was just moving Crown Burger across the street so that Mill Creek could go up with housing there. So they're not going to be profitable when they have to get a loan for $5 million to move. And in the case of the Crown Burger, they were going to get about half of that back. So they were going to end up with $2.5 million in loans. Townhomes are the missing middle of housing. And I have 2 daughters who both bought homes pretty early in life, 23 and 27. One of them went to Midvale because she could afford that. The other one went to Harriman.
Did she buy a townhome
She bought a
in
townhome
Midvale?
in Midvale.
How high are so you're saying a townhome that's
I'm
ground
saying-
level, it's not a part of a multi,
But there
family?
are double-stacked townhomes, where you literally have 2, they have 4 stories total. But they are not the ones in Holiday, not the $1 million ones in Holiday, but everywhere else, they are the missing middle. So that is a way to get our own kids to be able to buy here and live here in Cottonwood Heights.
with shared gardens? Audrey Pines just mentioned
Yeah,
that.
so I think that is a healthy thing to consider. I also think if we think about the Park City Redstone project, that's interesting because it has housing around the exterior, it has some higher housing, it has some townhome housing, and it has restaurants like the Red Rock Brewery that, again, people magnet to, wait in line to go out and eat at, and then shop the housing around. That's obviously has a lot more land than we have. But again, it's got a a couple restaurants, Gadotti's, some others that, that draw people. And my last comment, because I've been stacking them up during this meeting, you said we're beholden to others for the money to be able to do what we want to do. And most of you are probably going to throw darts at me when I say this, but we are in the perfect place to allow nightly rentals and to collect a 10% transient housing tax fund, which would give us a lot of money to do a lot of things, and we're collecting it from somebody else.
So let's just clarify, you brought up so many good points. When you say additional nightly rentals, are you talking about ADUs? Are you talking
No,
about?
I'm talking about letting
Like
people
hotel?
rent their house.
Well, those are
Airbnbs.
Yeah,
VRBOs.
they get permits, but then you can.
Well,
collect
that
the
isn't,
transient
that's
housing on it.
considered an accessory dwelling unit, which is part of our current strategy for more affordable housing. There's internal ADUs that are also referred to as, well,
Yeah.
there's very little zoning that allows for nightly rentals.
I know.
And is that your point?
My
That you
point
would
is,
like to see
yeah.
us rethink that?
Sure, because you can, if you can manage it, which I think we do, because we require a permit, but if you've got a permit, then you've got a way to tax.
Well, we actually don't allow permits unless you live in one of those zoned areas. So for instance, I live, my husband 20 years ago made our downstairs as completely a lock-off ability, and during the 2002 Winter Olympics, we did short-term rentals back in, again, 2002. Now, but I don't live in an area that's zoned for that, and so, especially now that I'm in the city council, believe me, we won't be doing that. But my point is that would be a major change in strategy and in zoning to consider. But I can say to your very good point, I am approached by people who don't even live in my district wanting me to help them because they want to do nightly rentals during the ski season because they can barely meet their mortgage payments. And to give permits, business licenses to do that, I think I will go on record as saying I would like the city council to consider that. Right now,
Really?
that is not even under consideration. I don't think it should be unlimited, but I do think that's what Sandy City does. They have broken their city into like neighborhood areas, so it's beyond, the various districts that are for voting purposes. And they allow a maximum number, I forget what it is, per these neighborhood areas. Right now, again, we have extremely few places within Cottonwood Heights.
So that's probably not going to happen for quite a while. Airbnbs and VRBOs hollow out the housing stock. And in most cities in the country are finding that they have an affordable housing problem now. I mean, while I was in San Diego working there, it's a great place for VRBO or Airbnb. It just totally ruins the housing stock. So, I mean, I live where I come down into the valley, and could I rent it out? Oh no, that's my neighbor. Okay, Tony,
And
go ahead.
people don't want 52 families living next door to their house either.
Well, but right
Okay,
now,
let's-
year-round living, year-round is only what we allow.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay.
But I actually had a comment though.
Oh, please, Tony, go ahead.
Yes, we have a blank slate, tabula rasa. But to me, that's part of the problem, because we have a blank slate, but we don't have infinite funds. So if we don't, as you said earlier, determine what are the constraints on how we're going to make this commercially viable, that's going to affect how we slide our little boxes around, what we put there, and how much parking we need, and things like that. And to me, it's not defined enough on what those constraints are, so I can even put boxes on the.
Okay, so what you're saying is this meeting is early.
Until
Until you have a plan,
When,
you don't know whether you have money or not.
sure.
Because money is available for everything we've talked about. It just depends who's liable for that money. That's all.
And I know, I believe you do need some anchor draws to make all the other businesses viable. I think the mayor agrees with that. And
He's a
we'll-
banker.
And we'll have to see what that, well, I come from a shopping center family.
If I,
So I-
Okay,
I
no,
have
let's
fourth-
get these
I have
people-
fourth comment. My fourth comment is, short term, why don't we just keep tenants in it? My office is in Sugar House. Sugar House is a nightmare right now. It's a homeless nightmare. And I have urine all around my front door. I have, people that I have to say, can you please, move on, I'm trying to have a business here. It's bad, it's really bad. And I love Solutions Utah, I love AMP, I love all that, they're all great ideas. But in the short term, why don't we, and by short term I mean, even if you went a year-to-year lease and you said, if there's any businesses that want to go in this space, I mean, between the conceptual, the design, getting the financing, getting the permitting, to the day you actually break ground on something over there, you're at least a year or a year and a half.
You mean
the
utilizing the
meantime-
existing
Yeah,
rental space in the
yeah,
hillside?
there probably
Well, I want you to
is.
know, I forwarded that idea about 9 months ago. And I got Mike Johnson, our economic development director, Sean Newell jumped in on it, and I had a citizen from District 4 who has a background in leasing commercial space, and the four of us walked through the empty spaces that exist. And I was for your very idea of why don't we look at what revenues can be driven between now and when we break ground?
Yeah.
Again, I was the only one who showed any interest. All my four colleagues were against the idea. They said, no, it's a bother, it's probably not viable. But I mean, I took notes on every single unit we walked through, and about 70% of them could easily have somebody move in. There were about 30% that had water damage and problems. So, to your very good idea, I could not get support or traction from the CDRA members.
And this right now, in the condition, and this is affordable. So the new businesses.
Okay, well then, I don't know how
that-
we forward your idea. I share your idea, but I
But,
couldn't get
the
traction.
comment about small businesses that want to start up, this is rent that they can afford, and maybe by the time we're ready to break ground on something else, they're big enough and substantial enough that they can move into the new space.
So I think you may be giving hope where there isn't much, because the price of the land has now been established. And that is a responsibility that the expenses, land is not free. Anyway, did you have one more?
Yeah, I have just.
Could you come forward and make your comment, please, if you don't mind?
It's a small comment in response to the whole short-term rental thing. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with affordable housing, because I think that it's what's unaffordable. Like, we are making rent affordable, but we're not making home ownership affordable. I do think, so that's my only like little thing for being able to maybe rent a room during a ski season legally.
Well, thank you. You are one of the, for again, anybody that's listening to the recorded version of this, someone from the, I'm guessing, millennial generation just came forward. She's the only one of few in the room that's of that generation, and that's who I am trying to be sensitive to.
Yeah.
All the different generations. Obviously, I'm in the baby boomer generation. There are those in the traditionalist generation who also have a home where they are now widowed or whatever, and that might be the income for them to stay in their home, or for someone from younger generations to have ownership. I am opposed to this plethora of apartment buildings that part of the TOD, transit-oriented development, that the state legislature supports. We're watching these monolithic buildings going up, but they're 90% apartments. If we don't create spaces where people can acquire some financial stability through ownership, we are, in my opinion, shooting our society's, the quality of life, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So I appreciate you coming forward as someone from a younger generation stating that people are having to be real strategic. How can we sustain a mortgage that might be 50% of our income?
Right.
For my generation, anything over 30% of your income, unthinkable. And today, it's just breathtaking what the challenge that, for ownership. So thank you. Anything further?
And that's kind of the difference between like bulk density and gradual density. You know, like that is gradual. Like people may be opposed to a 100-unit apartment building coming into town, but you know, this is just another idea. And on that, I also do. I'm with you on the 100-unit affordable housing. I think that's a great idea, and I think it's something that coming from New York, like it happens a lot. Like how do we approach density and traffic and so a place where you can like live, work, play, like those three things in one area is like super helpful.
Well, and that's a challenge to me about ADUs scattered all over Cottonwood
Yeah.
Heights versus doing something on a transit line.
Right.
I am spending a lot of my time and energy trying to forward to get better transit as well as active transportation. Give people some alternatives. And one of the good things about the location of Hillside Plaza is it is on our Fort Union Boulevard, which is one of the only places other than Highland Drive that we have bus service. So those that live in Midvale, maybe the workers that supply our local businesses with people that are willing to work for under $20 an hour. So how are we thinking in the long term economically supporting our local businesses and getting patronization to our local businesses? I mean, this is a very holistic, there's a need for holistic thinking here, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great.
Gordon, thank you so much for all your time and energy on this. We
Yeah, appreciate it.
Notice the remarketing affordable housing is attainable.
Well, the word attainable is the important thing.
Yeah.
As Gordon, I appreciated him describing AMI and some of the things that go with that. So it's now just after 11:30. Thank you all for everyone that attended, and please stay tuned in.
Ellen, a question.
And Gordon, sir, I agree with Lonnie.